Hello, everyone. This is Victoria Neff with the EdTech Center at World Education, and we are thrilled to be here with you all for the second webinar in our Move Forward with Mobile Learning webinar series. This second webinar will be on instructional support. So today you'll hear from our presenters, Jeff from Crowded Learning, Tiffany from the Dover Adult Learning Center in New Hampshire, Sherry from Providence Public Library in Rhode Island, and they'll be sharing some of the resources from our mLearning Resource Hub site, as well as strategies and tips for organizing content that can be available for learners joining from a mobile device, so making it easy for them to navigate and organize the different opportunities out there. Also, we'll be sharing some different resources and tools that you can use for goal setting with learners and tracking goals as well. And then finally, we'll review some tips for designing content, so instructional design for learners that are joining through a smartphone or handheld device. Before we get into the presentations today, I have a few announcements and reminders I just want to share with you all. The first is that, as mentioned, this is the second webinar in our series of 4. These are held on the third Wednesday of every month, so at 1 p.m. Eastern, and that's 10 a.m. Pacific and noon Central Time. We have 2 implementation areas left that we have not covered, and that is what you see here, evaluation and outreach. And we'd love to hear from you out of these 2 remaining practice areas, which one is more, you're very interested in and you'd love us to cover in our next webinar. So feel free to use the chat to share your feedback. We'll definitely take the feedback that's shared here into consideration when making the decision for the next webinar. So we'd love to hear from you on that. And now what I'm going to do is just do a quick review of our site for those of you who have not been to our site or had the opportunity to join the first webinar. So I'm just going to navigate to our website, which is just edtech.worlded.org. And what you can do to easily get to our mobile learning page is just hit the mLearning at the top, on the top navigation. And you'll be brought to our resource hub here. The way that this site is organized is we have the first landing page devoted to describing, what the site is all about, how the resources are organized, the history of our work with the mobile learning leadership team, and really how this initiative came about. So you can read more about the Adult Literacy X Prize Communities competition here and how that's connected to the Mobile Learning Leadership Team. And you can also click on this link here to learn more about who is represented in our current Mobile Learning Leadership Team. So going back to the resources, you can access the resources by, if you're on the landing page here, by clicking on any one of these 4 practice areas for accessing the resources, or you can just click on any one of these on the side. So today we'll be talking about instructional support. So I'm going to click on that. And again, the way that these resources are organized, there's a really small preview image that might showcase what the tool looks like or what the resource looks like, if it's a template, if it's a slide deck, or a photo illustrating what might be covered, or sort of previewing what the content is about. So for example, today we'll be reviewing these goal setting and tracking worksheets. Tiffany will be presenting on those. So what you would do to access this resource is just click Get Resource. And in this case, it's a download. So the Microsoft Word document will automatically download when you press Get Resource, and you can open that up and start using it right away. Sometimes the other the other resources, for example, Sherry's resource here might be a link to that resource. So here is the template for smartphone instructional design. And if you have any trouble accessing these resources at all, please let us know. We'd also encourage you, if you did use this resource or you used this resource in tandem with something else, whatever it may be, we would love to hear from you. So at the bottom of each resource is a section for you to comment on that tool, resource. Let us know if you used it, if you found it helpful, why or why not. So we encourage you to please share your feedback that way. The last thing that I'll say is that we also encourage you all to submit a resource. So the way you can do that is by just clicking on right on the front page here. It's actually the first link. Submit your mobile learning resource here, and that will bring you to this form where you can just complete a few fields describing what the resource is, and then attach the file or link and hit upload, and we'll get it, and we'll be sure to review and share that with the field. So we'd love to hear from you, and whether that's, if you used your resource and if you found it helpful, and any other tips that you want to share with practitioners, or if you have a different resource that you don't see on our site and you'd like us to consider featuring it. So that's it. I'm going to go back to the presentation here. Again, let us know if you've used a resource. Please share feedback. And if you have a resource that's not on here, we welcome you to please submit that through our form. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Jeff, who's going to share some really awesome tools and strategies for organizing and sharing mobile optimized content with learners. So Jeff, take it away.
Here is hyperlinked, so you'll be able to hyperlink to every single tool that is mentioned. But this is a page on our website that just sort of walks through various tools for communication and for content. And so I'm not going to dive into these content tools in terms of, hey, this is a great mobile learning resource. Like, you feel free to explore what's in here in terms of some of the content and decide for yourself if you feel it's mobile friendly. Most of them are, some of them are not. But my real focus is going to be on strategies for actually integrating them. And so when we're looking at some of this mobile friendly content, some of the trends that we've been seeing in terms of how teachers are leveraging this are doing things like creating mobile friendly content playlists, where it's, here's a playlist of content that has a number of resources. Maybe they are aligned to a specific skill and you can go through them at will. We're also seeing people integrating mobile-friendly content into both print and to online lessons, so that maybe you're doing a Zoom sort of session with students where they obviously benefit mostly from doing that from a computer, but making sure that we're integrating mobile-friendly resources within so that students can be accessing some of that content, knowing that more learners depend on their mobile device for internet access than the computer. And then also we're seeing this as opportunities for learner self-study. And Tiffany, who's following me, is going to get more into some of the strategies around that in terms of learner self-study. But I'm going to really be focusing my portion on here's how you can actually be putting forth those resources in an organized manner so that students can participate in self-study. So exciting moment number one, because this has been something that people have been asking and I have been trying to figure out. I had found a tool, didn't mean to go back there, a couple weeks ago called Appetize.io, and it is a mobile emulator. And it's really designed for developers to be able to test their apps, but I was finding it to be very useful as a way of showing how to operate the phone and how to operate different things on the phone. And so you can show students how to adjust their settings, and you can do that on any iPhone device and any Android device as well. But it's really limited. For one thing, all of the demo that I'm showing you, it's only a 1-minute demo. But we do know that teachers are really trying to figure out ways to show and model how to use these apps with their students. So in my search yesterday, I found a tool called Reflector, and there's a link here, and I'm going to show you what that looks like just in a second. So Reflector is not free, but there is a trial that you can play with. It's a one-time cost of $17, and that may be of interest. So I currently have Reflector Teacher demo, and I'm going to click on this, and now I'm actually going to show my camera so that you can just see what I'm doing. So I have my phone right now, and I have Reflector Teacher open. And what this is going to allow me to do is on my phone, I can go to screen mirroring. And now when I go to screen mirroring, and you can do this on any device, you're going to see the options of where you can mirror. And my computer shows up as one of them. So now I'm clicking on that, and you'll see on my screen here on my computer, what's popped up is that my device has been detected, and now I can show it. And so now you can see my phone in front of you, and this is as long as you want. And you can actually share a code with other students so that they can share. So I'm bringing this up because we know that this has been a challenge teaching students how to use some of these things from a distance. And now you have the ability to at least model the app use. So I'm actually going to use this as a driver for some of the content. But then what I also discovered yesterday is that Zoom now also has the ability to do this if you have an Apple device. And so I'm going to quit out of Reflector Teacher here, and I'm going to go to my Zoom controls, and I'm going to do a new share to my iPhone. And I have to move the controls to be able to do this. And now, once again, what I'm seeing is I just have to mirror my screen. My computer is going to show up as an option, and I can now share it. And now you see my phone again. And I'm doing this through Zoom using my iPhone. Now, this is only available for iOS on Zoom right now, but I'm going to just show you some of the things that I'm going to be talking about from my phone so that you can see them. So one of the ways that we can share content is through a tool called Wakelet, and this is what I was asked to focus most on today. Wakelet is a tool that's very flexible for teachers to use. And actually, can you see my screen right now?
We can see it. Yep, we can see your phone.
You can see my phone. Okay. So Wakelet is a tool that allows you to do a number of things in regard to sharing out content, and you can share it in multiple ways. So I'm going to actually, because I'm not seeing my own screen right now. So here I am learning with you as we talk about, sorry.
We're seeing equivalent fractions.
Cool. Okay. Well, the thing is, I can't, and I need to do something about that. Interesting. Well, here I thought I was being clever. I'm so sorry. I'm going to just do it again so I can be modeling completely on here. I'm so sorry. This is what I get for trying something new. So Wakelet is a tool that allows you to organize content in different ways. So we'll stick to the presentation just to stay safe right now. And so here are 3 Wakelets that I've created that I use for different types of things. So the first one is a resource list, and this is a bunch of resources that teachers can use for blended learning in their classroom. And so it is a Wakelet where I've literally just put a bunch of different websites in one place, and I can share this Wakelet with teachers, and then they basically have all of those resources. So if you have regular websites that students are going to, you could create a resource list. Here's another one where I've created specifically for a lesson, or in my case, a professional development training, where I have links to all of the different activities that we're going to be using in the session. And so the only thing I have to share with teachers at the start of the training is the Wakelet. And then that is the launching pad for any different resource that I want to include in the training. And then the third Wakelet that I have here is an actual standalone lesson. So this is something that I can share with students. Wakelets can be shared directly through Google Classroom or through tools like Remind. So literally when you share it, there's multiple ways to share it with students. But in this case, I've pulled together learning resources around the concept of equivalent fractions. And so there's learning resources, there's game-based resources, and then there's practice sets from Khan Academy, all in one Wakelet, so that that is something that once I've created it, I can put it up on a website, and then maybe it is something I'm assigning, or it's something that's standalone for students to work on their own. And I can use mobile-friendly resources for that. Another tool that I think is helpful for flipped learning, and as we're thinking about how to integrate mobile resources into what we're doing right now virtually, is Padlet. And Padlet, if there's one tool that I would say to teach learners how to use, I like Padlet because it allows for a collaborative space. And in this case, this is a model lesson where we're doing order of operations. And the notion would be to send out a Padlet with prompts ahead of time. It's very mobile friendly for students to answer. And in this case, these are 3 open-ended prompts, and students are all providing different answers to those prompts in the space below. So then when we get to class, we have a bunch of different student answers to these prompts that they've done ahead of time, and we can use that as the springboard for discussion during our class, where I as a teacher can ask a student to explain their reasoning for why they gave the answer the way they did. You also can use Padlet to store content and put a bunch of resources in similar ways to Wakelet, but the added benefit is this collaborative space that you offer. The other thing that we've been seeing a lot of use of is QR codes. And QR codes, here are 2 QR code generators that are free. You simply need to paste a URL into them, and then you get the QR code, and you just need to copy the image. And then you can integrate that into a worksheet, into a presentation slide, onto a website, anywhere. And students have the ability to access that website from their mobile device simply by scanning it. And that can take a print activity like this vocabulary worksheet that is freely available. And we've added a Quizlet set to it, and we've provided the link in this Google Doc so that if students are working on the computer, they can click on the link to access the Quizlet. Or if they literally have this print handout, they can scan the QR code with their phone and then launch the Quizlet on their phone. So it takes something that is sort of a stagnant piece of paper and allows you to build in additional interactivities. And then the last thing I'm going to share is just thinking about how you can organize mobile resources for self-study. And this is something that, as I mentioned, Tiffany is going to be talking about. But I do want to point out 2 tools that we've done sort of to tackle that challenge. Last week, we released a GED math video prep app that's powered entirely by Khan Academy videos. What we hear from educators is that they love Khan Academy, but students don't know where to go within Khan Academy in order to work. And so Florida Literacy Coalition had developed a website for self-study using Khan Academy videos, and there's a website available. We took it and built it into an app using a free app building tool that doesn't require coding. And so now students can navigate through to any of these topics and lessons and work through the content and track their work within the app. The other tool that I wanted to mention is Skill Blocks, which is one tool that Crowded Learning has created that allows you to search for skills and then see what resources align. And my other, oh my goodness, I love life moment that came literally an hour ago was the state of South Carolina has literally created Skill Blocks playlists, 200 of them for each of the 4 TABE levels. And so if I go here, they've literally linked them. So I won't even get into the creation part. I'm just going to show you what it looks like. And what they've done, because it's so easy to find resources, is they've listed out the print resources that students have available, as well as online resources that can augment that skill. And they've made this available to everyone in the state. And so all students need to access that is they could click on that or just this code, and then they can go to Skill Blocks and add that. So it's really about thinking about how are we delivering these resources, how are we organizing these resources, and what is the purpose of making these resources available, whether they're for an actual lesson or for learner self-study, or for providing more options within a lesson. I'm going to stop there. Sorry about my snafu.
That was great. Thanks so much, Jeff. So I'm just going to unmute Diana, who's going to facilitate the Q&A. So Diana, you should be unmuted. And I'm just going to share. Well, Jeff, I'll let you keep sharing in case people have questions and you want to refer to anything.
Okay.
Well, people are loving the mirroring. And also Wakelet, and Xavier says LCNV has been using it, and Victoria asked, who's Victoria? No, Victoria asked you to chat the link to the site you were just showing.
Oh, the South Carolina website?
Yes.
Yeah, I will do that because that literally about a half an hour ago, I was made aware that this was being done, which is exactly what we wanted from Skill Blocks. Rather than having, sorry, I've got to make sure I'm sending this to everyone, rather than having people, individually, do things, which is great. They've collaboratively worked together where teachers have tackled different topics and created skill blocks and then shared them out on this website. So they also have created some Wakelets on this website as well, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, where they've been creating, making lesson creations using the Wakelet tool. And those are all sort of listed in spreadsheet. Like this is exactly the type of collaboration that we all hopefully can be doing to just get more mobile friendly and free content out there.
And that's it so far.
I have a question, Jeff. So what are you using right now to share your from your phone? Is that also Zoom? Are you able to share in two places?
Yeah, so the problem was I switched to Zoom because I figured that's what more people have and it's free, or well, it's free with Zoom. But you can't share both your phone and your screen, right?
Right.
And that was sort of my intent. So now I went back to Reflector. And so Reflector allows me to have this open. And so I'm just sharing my desktop, but just so we can actually see a Wakelet. This is one that I created, and I actually use skill blocks to find the resources, and then I put it into a Wakelet. And basically I wrote an introduction about equivalent fractions. And then now they have some exploration simulation type activities to focus on fraction equality. And then there's learning resources. And so this is a reading, this is a video, this is a lesson that has a reading, a video, and an interaction. And then here are some games, if my screen wants to pop up again, that relate to equivalent fractions. And then here are practice sets that align to it. So it's a really great tool for pulling all these things together. And then the way I share this with students is I can share it in any sort of way that I want. But if they just download the app and the app is free, all of the Wakelets that have been shared with them, they can just add to their Wakelet and they're in there.
There are a few more questions now. Marcia is asking, do you know if Skill Blocks have created something like this for English learners?
Skill Blocks came out in March, and we are now sort of finding out how people are using it as literally as I did this morning, which is awesome. So as we're getting a sense of how people are using it, we're going to sort of figure out what the next iteration of Skill Blocks is. And within that, we are going to be adding in reading resources. And eventually we want to get into English language learner resources as well. The thing is trying to figure out what the skill structure is that we organize content around. So right now it's the College and Career Readiness standards for math, and we know there are standards for English language learners. And so we need to start framing how we're gonna build out.
Okay. There are a few more questions, but Victoria, I don't know how you'd like to manage the time.
Maybe just take one more and then we'll move to Tiffany's presentation.
Okay. And let's see. Sherry is asking if anyone has tried using Loom on phones.
Using what on phones?
Loom.
Oh, Zoom.
No, Loom,
Oh, Loom.
Loom.
I'm not even familiar. I've heard of that, but I've not explored it, so I do not know.
So
Well, if
maybe
anyone else has used it and wants to chat to Sherry and let us all know if you've used Loom on phone. I personally have not. I've only used it on desktop.
Hmm.
Thanks so much, Jeff and Diana. We're going to move to Tiffany's presentation. So I'm just going to reshare. And Jeff, feel free to respond. I think you had a few more questions in the chat, so feel free to respond to those directly. And anyone else, if you have any questions for Tiffany or anyone that's here, please share those in the chat. So Tiffany, I've unmuted you, and I'm just going to press present and take it away.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Victoria. I'm Tiffany Brand. I work as a technology integrator for Dover Learning Center in Dover, New Hampshire, and I'm also a mentor teacher in New Hampshire, mentoring teachers around the state with using technology. And so Jeff presented some really awesome resources for kind of curating some great learning materials for your students. But we also need to make sure that our students are using them once we give them to them. And one way we can help do that is with some resources to help them set goals and kind of track their work that they're doing on their mobile learning, their apps or the resources that you give them. So next slide, please, Victoria. So we know mobile learning apps are super convenient. They anytime, anywhere learning. They can do them in the car while they're waiting to pick up their kids or at break time at work. But even that convenience might not be enough to motivate them to keep using their apps, to not forget about them, and to continue making progress. And that's where goal setting can help. Next slide. So research tells us that that goal setting, SMART goals are helpful to help students reach their goals. And SMART goals, the important key is for them to be specific and measurable, something attainable. We know that they'll be able to do it, relevant to their work and their long-term goals. And also time bound, so having a particular time constraint to give them something to shoot for and make sure they're going to be able to reach those goals. On the next slide, we'll see that at the mobile learning website there are some resources that have been uploaded that you can download and use. Paper resources that are in Microsoft Word format. So these can be adapted for your students and printed out, or even used in electronic form if you wanted to create a Google Doc. This was one of the forms that I created for a training for our students, our teachers here in New Hampshire, to really kind of focus, once you give a student an app, how do you help them decide where they want to go with it? Because sometimes those apps have so many levels and different paths you can take. So a goal sheet will help your student focus on what they're planning on working on for a particular period of time. So in this case, this was set up to do to check in weekly with students, so they can write down what week it is, what app they're working in, maybe what app lesson they're working on, and have an idea about how many lessons they want to work on in the app. And then set a goal, how many minutes they want to work on their app this week, or how many lessons they want to make sure they progress through. And then kind of a checkbox, a recording area where they can kind of mark off quickly, okay, I used it 15 minutes this morning when I was waiting to drop off my kid at school. Check that off, or they can actually see the progress as they go through the week. Make sure they're working towards and will hit their goal by the end of the week. I really like the questions though, because when you check back in with your students on their goals, if they filled out the questions, you have the opportunity to have a conversation with them. So what did you like about the app? what interface elements might be giving them trouble. Maybe they got stuck logging in a few times. I found this is really helpful. I mean, I might be using an app and thinking it's pretty easy to get through, but then I find out that some students are getting stuck in a particular point. So this really helps kind of troubleshoot those issues before you wait a month later and it's like, well, how are you doing on your learning app? It's like, well, I got stuck the first week and then I didn't do it anymore. So this will kind of nip that in the bud. You can really find out how things are going with the app, and then you can set goals for the next time period, the next week. And then when you reach the end of the time period, the student can write down how many minutes they did in total. Did they reach their goal? And what kind of goal do they want to set for the next time? So it really kind of facilitates that conversation with your students to make sure that they have a plan for how they're going to use their mobile app. So even though it's convenient, now they have some structure around it. And this meets all of those SMART goals. It's specific about what they're going to be doing. It's measurable. They can measure time. They can measure lessons. You'll set goals that are attainable for them so they can think about their schedule. Okay, I know I have these blocks of times to work on it, so I think this is a time period that, that I can attain. And of course, you'll pick lessons in the app that are relevant. And you have a time period, whether it's a week or a few days or a couple weeks, where you'll check back in with your student to see how they're doing. All right, next slide. So there's some other tracking charts that are also downloadable from the mLearning website. So this one lets you kind of track your usage over a longer period of time so students can really see how their learning can add up. So something like this is super adaptable. You could even, color in a bar chart or use numbers to really kind of have students see how much learning that they're doing on their mobile app on their own. And the next slide. And this is kind of designed almost to be a little pocket card where students can, instead of a big sheet of paper, students can have just a quick pocket card. They could keep it with their phone or in their wallet, and they can kind of check in to see, they know what a simple goal, how many minutes a week they want to work on the app, and then they can kind of check in with themselves. Are they reaching their goal? Are they not reaching it, but they want to keep trying? Or maybe you need to change what the goal is. And I think this might work really well. Kind of on the flip side, the next slide has a tracking chart that kind of has you fill out the particular levels that are in an app. So in this example, they used one of the math areas of the Learning Upgrade app, which was part of the X Prize competition last year. And so by filling in what lessons are available in the particular app your students are used, you could highlight which ones they wanted to work on for the particular week, and the student can check them off as they complete them. So again, if an app is confusing with a lot of different paths they could take, this will help them focus. These are the lessons I'm going to focus on for this week. All right, next slide. So those are some resources, some kind of paper resources that can be adapted that are up on the mLearning website. I have some teachers though who are just, we switched to kind of remote and mobile learning really quickly during the pandemic. So some teachers are just keeping things really simple. Students have a notebook. They're giving them, either a Wakelet with some resources that they're supposed to work on for the week. They might have some paper materials, some book materials that they're also going to work on as well as their apps. In this case, this teacher has a YouTube playlist with YouTube videos that she asked her students to work on, and then that information is texted or emailed back and forth. Student quick takes a picture of their journal where they wrote down how long they worked and what they worked on, and can email or text that back to their teacher, or they can have a conversation on the phone about what they've done. So this is a very kind of low-key, fairly low-tech way of doing the same kind of thing, setting goals and then tracking progress and using that to inform the next set of learning goals or lessons that your students might be working on. And then next slide shows kind of a little more high-tech way you could take this goal setting and tracking. If you do a Google search on habit tracking apps, these are super popular now for tracking how much water you drink or how much exercise that you do. So you can track any kind of habits you want, and students can use habit tracker apps to track their progress in their learning apps. So there's a whole bunch of them, and I'll chat a link to an article I found that listed a whole bunch of different habit tracker apps. I'll just throw that up in the chat right now. And I've tried a few of them. I haven't used these with students yet, but I'm going to be hopefully talking about these over the summer. With the teachers that I work with. But you can choose which habits you want to track. You can set nudges and reminders. So on your phone, it will say, hey, don't forget to practice your math app today, or don't forget to practice your English in Cell Ed today. And it will also like calendar for you, show you kind of streaks and progress. So yeah, it will show you worked on your app every day for 5 days in a row. Some of them will even give you little awards and maybe some gamification as well. So the next slide shows what one of those apps looks like. This is a simple one called Habit List. So you can set your particular goal. So practice Cell Ed for 10 minutes. You can set like frequency every day, 3 times a day, and remind me at 9:10 in the morning. It will keep track of all of the different habits that you want to remember to do, and then you just tap on them to check them off. And then for each habit, it will mark on a calendar which days you worked on them. So you can really see, goal is to fill up that calendar with green, working on your stuff every day. And some apps even go a little bit further. If you go to the next slide, this one intrigued me. This is a habit tracking app that's an adventure game. So you still set your habits, and it will give you reminders. But every time you check off that you did a habit, it adds like experience points to you that you can spend on like different outfits and items for your character. And you can participate. You can get participate in quests and challenges with others. So it's social, so you could do it with people in your class, but you could do it also with other people who use this app. This one was a language learners one that I saw, so it was a challenge for lots of people learning another language. So it's kind of a fun way. For some students, this might be really appealing. I remember I had a class with a couple of hardcore video gamers in it, and I think they might have liked this habit tracking app for working on their English. So that might be a lot of fun. Whatever tools you use, whether it's paper or taking pictures of a journal, or something more high-tech like a habit tracking app, goal setting and tracking is important and will help your students make progress in their mobile learning apps. And I'll stop there and open it up to questions.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. That was really great. And there's a lot of people commenting in the chat about just the variety that you showed, the low tech, the high tech, the gamified kind of ways of goal setting and tracking. So thank you. That's such a nice array that you shared with us. And like you said, we know that when learners can see their progress and monitor their own efforts, they're more likely to persist in their studies. So this is always an important topic. A question that I had was, you mentioned that one of your classes really liked the Habitica because it's kind of a game-like feel. Of the other charts and strategies that you shared, what are some of the other ones that have been really popular or just have engaged a lot of students well?
I've used kind of a paper version of app tracking. Actually, with my, I have a computer literacy class, and they had goals to really improve their keyboarding. So we were trying out several keyboarding, not apps, but free websites. And so the students would have a goal sheet of how many minutes each week they were going to practice and how many days a week they were going to practice. And then had some questions about, what they liked about certain websites over others. And it was really successful to kind of help the students focus, okay, this particular website worked really well for some students and not for others. And so they had the, they had the ability to kind of communicate that back to me. And they would also come in and kind of talk about, how many minutes they worked on the week. So it was nice to hear those conversations happening, and it kind of, I think it might have pushed some students a little to work a little bit more the next week when they saw that their fellow classmates were kind of making progress towards their goals. So so in that particular class, the paper forms worked very well. I see Sherry had a question in the chat. Have the goal setting activities been equally successful among ESOL and ABE? And I think so. I work in my classes, I work with a lot of ESOL students, and that keyboarding class especially, they found that really helpful. The example of the journal is from an ABE class, and that's been working really well. Something maybe a little bit more informal, but the texting back and forth with the teacher has been really successful with her ABE class, where other forms of communication are sometimes more challenging. Just texting a quick phone photo of their journal and what they've done for the week, that's been really successful. And I think, you'll learn, what works and what doesn't work with a class or with students. And so hopefully I've given you enough ideas to try. So if something doesn't work, then you can switch over to something that might be more successful. Anything we can do to help move our students towards reaching their goals.
That's really great, Tiffany. And I think maybe we have time for one more question, and I guess I'll ask that question. So in case we have some program administrators on the call, sometimes we have to report out on different types of skills that students are learning. And we know that from WIOA that self-management skills and self-awareness, that's one of those college and career readiness skills that really is important. And goal setting very much falls into that. Does your program, are you all able to use these kind of tracking documents to help share with your funders and your supporters the skills that students are developing and working on?
A lot of times what our teachers are doing are using this tracking information to help them, especially during this time of a lot of remote learning, to have students self-report attendance hours. So we're able to take the hours that the students work and pair that with the lessons and the things they completed and count those towards proxy hours in their attendance. And then that then translates into data that we can put in our data system and inform our funding goals. So I think so that's mostly the way that I've seen that used, and certainly having a way to track this information and see this information over time has been really helpful for us.
Great. Thank you so much. This was wonderful, Tiffany. Thank you so much, Xavier, for facilitating the Q&A, and we'll move on to the next presentation from Sherry. And if you all have any other questions, just feel free to chat that in the chat, and Tiffany and others will chime in with any resources. So Sherry, I know I have your slides here. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to advance them or if you would like to, just let me know. Oh, sorry, you're on mute. Let me unmute you. You should be unmuted.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Victoria. Yes, you can go ahead and advance my slides. I wanted to just put my video on for a minute so I can say hi to everybody, and thank you for having me today. So this presentation is about designing your own content for smartphones. And this came about because we had done in Rhode Island a survey to our instructors in adult ed. And not surprisingly, we did find that most of the students were accessing learning resources exclusively through smartphones. But something we felt like we had to address was we often heard that students were at a disadvantage who were not able to access information through a larger screen. So I decided this presentation was in response to those teachers who reported that their students were at a disadvantage. And I'm assuming that most people here would also have found that using mobile learning for in adult ed has been the primary way that their learners are accessing that. The next slide. So I wanted to make this distinction between smartphones and mobile learning for the purpose of this presentation, because we commonly use the term mobile learning to refer to access of learning resources through any device that's portable. And this includes smartphones and tablets and even laptops. But smartphones generally have smaller screens than tablets, and I wanted to focus specifically on smart screens and provide a model for design that educators could use to plug in their own learning content. And we'll be sharing a full presentation on the site. So I'm going to be giving an overview of some of the main elements. The next slide. So there are three components for smartphone design. The goal of creating learning for smartphones is to simplify content but not dilute it. And we do this through micro-learning or creating small bite-sized learning pieces. The second point about creating an engaging, easy to follow lesson isn't unique to smartphones, but I wanted to put it here because it serves as a reminder to teachers when they're designing content that it needs to remain high interest, and especially when they're not in person to answer questions, that the learning path needs to be predictable and easy to follow. And I think that this is more challenging for remote learning, and especially for access on small screens. And thirdly is navigation, which should be easy for the user. And one way to accomplish this is to be consistent. And then we'll look at each of these a little bit. So there are several considerations that we have to think about when designing. And I'd like to mention that the original presentation has a variety of color combinations of background and text, which is intentional to show the stark color contrasts and how they look on screen. Next slide. So on this screen, I've listed three elements to consider when delivering instructional content for smartphone access. The first is cognitive load. So a lot of mental effort is required when learning on a smartphone due to the limitation of the screen size. With less information on a screen, the learner has to remember content from earlier screens, then process it and respond to it. On a laptop or a desktop computer or hard copy, that content is on one page where the learner can flip back and forth. So this is a larger demand on our working memory, and it's also combined with the physical interaction of scrolling and swiping, waiting for pages to load it, possibly figuring out how to navigate. And then we can add on to that the physical fatigue of looking down at a phone screen when our eyes, our neck, and our shoulders become strained. So the cost of this interaction means that less energy and effort is available for processing and learning. Secondly is learner engagement. For asynchronous learning, students often engage between other activities for short periods of time. And this has been heightened in our current environment in the last couple of months with the added responsibilities of having children at home, different family members that add to the distractions and interruptions. And thirdly, as I touched on earlier, navigation is different because instead of a mouse pointer, it's replaced by gestures like touching, pinching, and swiping. So we need to consider these differences when planning, and therefore we need to think and design differently. Next slide. I'm using Google Slides because this is a training presentation, but these tips apply to Google Docs or anything that you might upload to Google Classroom, posting on an online whiteboard, or any tool that teachers are using to deliver content. The key is to open it on your own phone and see how it works. Next slide. So the overarching structure to design, first is micro-learning, which I touched on earlier, which is bite-sized chunks of learning content. And that's bite-sized means that it's intended to be completed in about 3 to 15 minutes. And it should focus on one learning objective. So these learning objectives can stand alone, or they can connect to other bite-sized learning pieces. The guidance that I've given to teachers is to look at their lesson and then decide how to break it down into very small learning objectives. Secondly, is to consider providing micro-learning for asynchronous study. So asynchronous study would allow students to pick up their phone and engage in these kind of mini micro lessons when they have time, and knowing that they have a lot of distractions and interruptions, noise, maybe inability to concentrate. They might not be able to attend synchronous sessions due to their work schedules or other priorities. So I was thinking that typically mobile learning is designed for small time slots rather than long periods of engagement. And so I want to focus, I want to emphasize that this presentation was intended for the asynchronous learner. And thirdly is to schedule regular short check-ins to support that asynchronous learning. And the check-ins ideally would be with students individually, but also in small groups. The group meetings could focus on discussion questions that are academic or content-based and help build community and keep the learners engaged. And the individual check-ins could be one-on-one support, answer questions. And again, going with the idea of micro-learning, they should be short in nature. So individual check-ins could be scheduled for 10 to 15 minutes, and group conversations maybe 15 to 25 minutes. Next screen. So I've identified 5 basic elements to consider in the design. The first one is content. I've modeled in this presentation how to reduce cognitive load by limiting the main points on each screen to no more than 3. Second is planning the layout, and this refers to how content should be sequenced and formatted for small screens. One of the things about formatting is to make sure that you leave a lot of white space because students, it's a touch screen. And the third is improving readability. And this can be accomplished by keeping an eye on font size, colors, the way questions are designed. And again, layout plays a big role in making learning objects more accessible on smart screens. All of these elements overlap with one another. Next slide. The 2 more elements to consider are, number 1 is you can increase accessibility by thinking about the file type. For example, with videos, think about the resolution. For text, PDFs can usually be read by most smartphone software, whereas they might not be able to open a Word document. And videos, you can reduce the quality by changing the resolution so that the download is quicker. Images, you can resize them. So again, they're easier to upload. And navigation was mentioned earlier, considering touchscreen. So this means large objects with lots of space, navigation arrows, which I've inserted in the original presentation. And there are others, for example, put page numbers on things so you can easily refer students back to things. Make the navigation linear so they're only going back and forth. The layout also, just as on our large screen, we don't want to scroll left to right to read long sentences, but it's okay to scroll up and down. So those are some basics and overall of the main elements. There's more in a longer presentation. I believe the recording is available on the EdTech website, and a template for learning design that I've created for educators. So we're still striving to get devices and adequate broadband service into the homes of our learners, but in the meantime, we're looking to how best to give teachers strategies that can make their content more accessible and reduce the barriers to engagement. And that's about it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sherry. So Jeff, I have unmuted you and you are all set to facilitate this.
Great. And so if you see in the chat, everyone, Ebony posted the template that Sherry was sharing. So just because I think you said this, but these were done in Google Slides. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And what is the sort of in terms of operating these slides and navigating through, and I see a lot of people are in here, so that's awesome. But do you model sort of the navigation through each of these screens as you use a template like this?
Clarify that, Jeff?
Well, so if it's slides and they're viewing it on a phone, they have to go
Yep.
into sort of presentation mode.
Yes, yep,
Right.
yep. And then I put arrows down there so they know just back and forth. You know, initially I put the words back and next because that's a best practice of instructional design. But I realized that they kept thinking it was touch screen, which in PowerPoint and Google, you could hyperlink them to go back and forth, but I think it would be awfully time consuming for educators.
And then what would you, in terms of the design and thinking about just the amount of time with all the accommodations or considerations you mentioned ahead of time, what's your sort of idea around a good length of time that a learner would be engaging with a template like this?
3 to 15 minutes. Yeah. And one way to decrease the amount of time that teachers are preparing is to create a master slide, you know, and go in there and put in the navigational things, put in the colors, and then just keep it as a template.
That's great. And I think I love the suggestions that you have in terms of thinking about color and thinking about, you know, leaving a lot of empty space. I think we tend to like to overload things. I think people tend to be maximalist when they're getting into digital design instead of minimalist. So thank you for sharing that. And it does pair with a number of the accessibility accommodations that are out there. Tiffany asked a question related to, do you have any example lessons that teachers have created that you could share?
Yes, Tiffany, I have created 2 lessons when I initially gave this presentation to Rhode Island educators, and I created one for ESOL learners, and I was often hearing that it was the lowest ESOL level that were most difficult to engage when they only had smartphones. So I created a very pared down micro lesson that was actually used to onboard students to USA Learns and teach them some key vocabulary words for navigating on smartphones. And then I created a micro lesson for math, an example of introducing algebraic reasoning. And it's all available. I think, Victoria, correct me if I'm wrong, is a full slide deck going to be available somewhere on the EdTech website?
Yes, we'll put it under the instructional support resources. It's not up there right now, but it will be. However, the template that you created for teachers to use to adapt for their instruction is on there.
Okay, great. Because I've given some more details about layout and about content and about you know, color contrasts and things that matter. So I've touched on them and given an overview, but you'll find some more details in the full presentation.
So there was someone asking if that micro lesson on USA Learns is publicly available. So hopefully, do you have a link that you can share?
It's part of the full presentation.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. So that's in the presentation as well.
Mm-hmm.
One question that came up, and this is, you know, dealing obviously with accessibility, is are there certain color combinations that work better on phones than others?
Yes, I'm glad that somebody asked that. So normally for accessibility, and I'm not an LD expert, but from what I understand, black background and white text. But others, and it's the design that I used, not for this presentation, but on the original one, was dark blue and white text and yellow navigational arrows. So darker colors for the background and bright colors for the text.
And I just pasted a link in there into the chat. So the National Accessibility Educational Materials Center has sort of a set of standards for accessibility, and one of them is perceivable. And there's tools in there that literally allow you to test color combinations to see, based on size, whether or not it's appropriate for accessibility concerns. So yeah, there's tools out there that help you to check the color contrast to make sure that it is appropriate and can be read by people.
Yes, and my biggest tip is to look on your own phone. So when I've created these things, I go back and forth between my computer screen where I'm creating them and my phone and see how they look. And I've made a lot of adjustments because I didn't like the way that it looked on my phone. So I tell teachers that all the time. Use your own phone as a test. Make sure you test it out.
And I love the way that for putting it in Google Slides, obviously, you can also present these lessons, you know, in a Zoom. So it's sort of, it's doing two things at once. That could be a teacher facilitated lesson or something that students are using independently. I don't see any other questions.
And I think we are out of time. But I did just want to thank the presenters and the facilitators so much. There's just a wealth of information that you shared. We'll be sure to send out the links from the chat. I will put into a Google Doc and send out like some of the key resources that people shared. And then just a reminder that I'll just actually go back to our website. A reminder that many of the resources that were presented on today are available under instructional support. So the mobile app goal setting and tracking worksheets, learner navigation and tracking postcards, and then the template, a template that Sherry developed for delivering smartphone instruction. And then we'll be sharing the other larger slide deck with examples. So this one is just a template that you can use. So I just want to thank you all so much. And just a reminder that our next webinar is third Wednesday of July, and we will be sending out all resources from this meeting. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in about a month's time. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.